Hey, welcome back everybody. It's Chris Niccolls here with Technicals because we're reviewing a smartphone today. We've got the brand new Google Pixel Fold. So let's get on with Technicals, or is it PetaPixel, or Technicals brought to you by PetaPixel? Okay. Cue the intro. Now, of course, I've reviewed smartphones before, but I have to admit, this is the first folding phone that I've used. I mean, this is pretty much only the second major manufacturer folding phone on the market, following the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold. But you know, this is really the way we can revolutionize a phone, is by changing the actual physical design. And that's been one of my main issues with smartphones in general. Of course, as a photographer, I really want to look at this from the perspective of a photographer, but we'll talk about how it works with apps as well. But does this folding design give us some advantages or some disadvantages? I definitely want to cover that. But I have to say, I am intrigued by having a phone that can bridge the gap between a smartphone in my pocket and a tablet for all the stuff I want to use a tablet for. We are going to cover a lot about the body today, the functionality with the apps, the screen, the design, but when it comes to the 5 cameras and testing those, I really do want to go out in the field and do that out and about. Now let's get this first thing out of the way. This is an expensive phone. I mean, you're looking at about $1,800 roughly for 256 gigs of storage, pushing over $1,900 if you want 512 gigs of storage, and that's not really expandable beyond that point. But you are paying for 5 cameras, and you're paying for 2 screens, one of them being very large. Now, this is also physically heavier and larger than, say, a Pixel Pro 7. That camera is about, just around 213 grams. This is 70 grams more, 280. Okay, so yeah, this is going to feel a little bit heavier in the pocket when you're carrying it around, but how about how it feels? Well, as far as thickness goes, first off, I want to mention I'm using the Google case made for the Pixel Fold. It's actually pretty svelte on here, but also I'm really impressed that when you do close this together, there's no gap in between the screens here. There's no wasted space there. And actually, as far as thickness goes, it's really quite comfortable to carry around. I'd say it's only a third thicker than the Pixel Pro 7. So from that standpoint, they've done a really good job of making this thing fold, but keeping it quite compact. Now, while we're talking about the body, this is sealed against water. It's IPX8 rating, so you can take it underwater, like 1.5 meters or half an hour kind of thing if you want to. Splashes won't be an issue, but it is not dust resistant in any way. So first off, you do not want to be dropping this into the dirt or anything like that. I'd really be worried about it. Certainly don't take it to the beach. I mean, sand trapped in between those screens crunching together, roof. I mean, you do have this Corning Victus glass, and you've got a nice screen protector they provide that you should not remove, but still, although the hinge mechanism on here does seem very well machined, really nice. They say you can open and close it 200,000 times. My main inclination is you do not want to be rough with this. It's going to be, more delicate than a regular smartphone, absolutely. And, your temptation might be, hey, set this up as a tablet for the kids while you're in the car or something, but I don't know. I think I just trust a cheaper sacrificial tablet for kids to play with. I'd be really careful with this thing. So with this nice screen on the front, which you can actually set up as an always-on display, and then of course this really big screen when you unfold it, and a battery capacity of only 4,800 milliamps, actually a little bit less than the Pro 7, you'd imagine battery life here would take a hit. This has the exact same processor, 12 gigs of RAM, as the Pro 7a. Performance is basically identical, so this should last a little bit less. However, Google's saying that we should get basically 24 hours plus battery life on a full charge. So as long as I can go a full day with this phone and then still have a little bit the next day, I'm going to be happy. I don't think it's really an issue. Okay, so let's talk about screens next. Let's start with the external screen here. So this is a 17.4:9 aspect ratio. It's just over full high def. It's about like 2092 by 1080 pixels, and it's about 1550 nits peak brightness. So I think this can be fine to use in bright sunlight. This is going to be your brighter of the 2 screens that you have. Maybe not quite approaching iPhone nits, but certainly viewable in bright sunlight. But nobody cares about this screen. Everybody wants to know about this screen. So this is really well done. I mean, we've got a 7.6-inch screen. It's about a 6:5 aspect ratio. So it's actually almost square. Not quite, but almost. Now, if you're going to have such a large surface area like this, you want to have the resolution to back it up. This is like just over 2200 by 1840 pixels. It's pretty nice. If I'm looking at something like a YouTube video 16:9, I'm getting a substantially larger viewing experience on the folded screen rather than a smartphone screen turned sideways. But this is also really nice for things like photography. I mean, if I'm doing 2:3 ratio photos or 3:4 ratio photos, I've got tons of space here and it's just a bigger view. And if you happen to be shooting 4 or 5 live film and scanning it, and then you're going to put it on this phone and look at it. Oh, it's the GOAT. You have arrived. It's worth every penny. Now, this screen isn't quite as bright as the external screen. This is about 1450 nits at peak brightness, but that's still plenty. You can see this in bright sunlight, no issues. But really, beyond just like watching videos and looking at your photos, this also gives you a lot more real estate for apps. So certainly Google apps like YouTube, for example, yes, the full screen is very nice to use, but even when you're looking at comments beside the video playing, which Jordan and I often do so we can see what people are saying about us and then cry a little bit, it's nice that we have more surface area. It always feels cramped on a standard smartphone screen, or like Google Maps as well. I mean, I get a much more detailed view, and even if I've got the reviews and the websites and locations up on the left, I still have a very nice large viewing surface for the actual map itself. But the Google Pixel screen can also help you multitask. So you can also treat this basically like two vertical smartphone screens side by side. And I can have one app on one side and another app on another. This is great if I need to multitask. This is great if I just have ADHD. This is also, though, really handy. For example, like as a photographer, I could have Google Photos on the left screen. I could have Gmail or Messages on the right screen. And I could just cycle through my photos, look at them, still with a nice half of a screen. And then I can just drag and drop them over right into Gmail or into my text messages. So stuff like that. When it does come to multitasking, though, I should point out that at the time of this review, you can only have up to 2 apps running, okay? Whereas you might find that on Samsung Fold, you can go 3 or more. It might get a little bit chaotic, but you do have the ability to add even more apps all at the same time running. Here, I'm limited to 2. Maybe they'll change that in the future. So my main takeaway here as far as screens go is that when I first saw this, I figured there'd be some major compromises or something that was a problem, like the crease in the middle, but honestly, I don't even notice it. Or something with the screen sharpness, but really everything's nice and bright, easy to view, and it's very large surface. So really, there aren't any compromises other than the trade-off that it makes the phone quite expensive. But I'm really enjoying features like, you know, with my old man fingers, being able to use a larger keyboard surface and still be able to see my typing area. Or if I want to watch YouTube video and I don't have a stand for the phone, just the fact that I can put it on a table surface and conveniently watch it. I mean, these are really nice conveniences that I'm enjoying more and more as I use it. But I want to go take photos now, so let's get out in the field and see how this performs with the 5 cameras that are available. Okay, so as you can see, we're now out in the field with the Google Pixel Fold. We've already talked about the apps and the layout and stuff like that. Now I want to actually talk about the cameras, take some shots, and really talk about the photographic aspects of this new phone. So the Google Pixel Fold has 5 cameras. That's a lot. Now, first off, on the external screen, we do have a pretty standard selfie camera, 9.5 megapixels, gives you roughly a 24 millimeter equivalent fixed focus. I mean, it's fine. I'm also going to talk about the selfie camera that's inside the camera on the internal screens, but frankly, you're really not going to use them very often, even for selfies, and I'll explain that in a bit. But what I really want to get to is the 3 rear cameras and what they're capable of. So in the Google Pixel Fold, our main camera, we have a 48 megapixel quad Bayer. I mean, its outputting is a 12 megapixel camera, but we do get a nice resolution bump there. It is optically image stabilized, which I like. f1.7 gives us an equivalent focal length of about 25, 26 millimeters, so it's still a nice wide angle main camera. This is a type 1/2 inch sensor, so yeah, it's a little bit smaller than what you're going to find in the Google Pro 7, and I was noticing then low light performance, it's still very good, but not quite as good as the Pro 7's main camera. Now the Pixel Fold has actually a really nice ultra-wide lens, gives you about a 12 millimeter full frame equivalent. It's an f2.2 aperture, 10.8 megapixels. Now this is actually a type 1/3 size sensor, so it's actually quite similar to what you get in the Pro 7. So as far as ultra-wide photography goes, you're not really at a disadvantage here, and it's actually a lot of fun to use. And finally, let's talk about the telephoto lens. It's giving us our 5x optical zoom here on the Pixel Fold. I'm getting a full frame equivalent of roughly 110 millimeters here, so, you know, nice tight field of view. The aperture is actually quite bright, f3.05, which is brighter than the f3.5 lens that you get on the Pixel Pro 7. However, you are getting a smaller sensor here. It's a type 1/3 roughly in size. So smaller sensor, a little bit brighter aperture. So in the household, I've got access to the Pixel Pro 7 as well as, of course, testing the Fold here. And when it comes to image quality between the two, the only real compromise with the Fold is the main camera, and it's pretty minor. I mean, the ultra-wide's very similar, the telephoto has a trade-off. The fact of the matter is the Pro 7 can fit larger sensor cameras in it than we can get here in the Fold for the most part. But I'm still finding image quality to be very similar. Processing is basically identical, so you know, the experience of shooting it, I'm liking it. As far as autofocusing goes, very similar between this and the Pro 7, which is to say nice and fast. It shoots quickly. I don't feel like I'm really lagging or missing a lot of action shots. So overall, this is a really enjoyable photographic experience. So just by the nature of being able to fold this phone in half, it does let me do some interesting setups where I would normally have to use a tripod and a smartphone holder, or just handhold things or prop it up against a beer bottle or something. I mean, we've all done that. So this does give us some nice conveniences. One of the most obvious is here is I can just fold the phone in half, have the rear cameras facing out, and just use it as a tripod on a tabletop surface. I mean, no movement, nice and stable. I mean, this would be really good for just trying to stabilize group shots in a restaurant in low light, as much as, you know, putting it on top of my car and shooting an astrophoto of the stars. So that's a really nice convenient setup. So when I do fold the camera, do this setup, you can see that the bottom part of the screen now becomes my controls. I can change lenses, I can take pictures, I can adjust exposure. It's nice to have that as display. And then my photo is just framed in the upper screen. Now, what if I want to go vertical? Well, unfortunately, I can't do vertical shots using the folded screen that way very easily. However, what I can do is go to my outer exterior screen here, get that framed up, and then if I just open it slightly, you can see that it stays on that upper screen, and then I can compose that way and I can still have some sort of position. Obviously, I can't really aim the cameras up or down very easily, but in certain situations, that might be helpful. Now, regularly on most smartphones, if you're gonna do selfies, you're using the front-facing camera rather than the rear cameras, and they tend to be a little bit poorer in image quality. This particular phone does have an inner camera inside the fold, but you know, it's an 8-megapixel f2 lens, about a roughly 24mm full-frame equivalent field of view, but it is a smaller sensor, so I would only use that if I was doing, like, you know, video conferencing, something like that with the bigger screen on the fold. What's really great about this, though, is I could do selfies with the rear-facing cameras, which are much better quality. I can simply switch screens here, and now I can use that external screen folded out with the rear-facing cameras. I can still compose, but now I get all of my high-end camera options, so that's a really nice feature if you're really into selfies. So when you take a look at smartphone images, I mean, it's very subjective because there's so much computational stuff going on in the background. It's not so much like regular cameras that we normally review, where I can just say, okay, this is the sensor size, this is the lens, and this is what I'm getting, and then be able to compare it. But I will say some subjective things about what I'm finding here on the Pixel, and I've used my wife's Pixel Pro 7, I've used my Samsung S23, Jordan's iPhone, Vivo's. I mean, I've used lots of phones and taken lots of different pictures, and what I would say that strikes me most about the Pixel here, first off, color and tonality seems to be pretty natural, like any phone, a little bit more on the saturated side, but skin tones are especially nice on the Pixel, and I see this on the Pixel Pro 7 as well. So skin tones look natural. When it comes to the portrait mode as well, where it's introducing sort of artificial bokeh, it actually looks quite nice. I mean, in this portrait of Jordan, the skin tones look good, his face is nice and sharp, but you can see it's got natural fall off on his shoulders, and the background's not excessively soft. I mean, it does actually look quite pleasing to the eye. But even when I'm not using the portrait mode, for example, in close-up shots where I'm getting natural shallow depth of field, I really like the way that the main lens is rendering that background. So of course, one thing I really wanted to try on the Fold was taking photos with the camera unfolded and seeing that unique experience. I mean, I am getting a much larger screen surface. Now, there is an immersive mode here. It's a crop of your photographs though. So when the immersive crop is turned on, you can see how it does fill the screen really nicely unfolded. It is very immersive, that's why they call it that. But you can also see how we're cropping in quite significantly, losing a lot of our field of view. When I go back to no crop here, you can see that we are still getting a fairly large part of the screen being used, but now we're using the entire sensor. We're not cropping anything, and this is what I'm gonna use going forward. But honestly, I don't think I'm gonna be using the camera in fold mode very often to take photos, and here's why. First off, the screen's not that much larger when I'm not cropping the images compared to the good old external screen here, but also when I wanna take photos, it's really a two-handed affair. It's just too unbalanced here to be reaching over with my thumb and taking photos or pressing the button on the side and having this off here hanging. I really wanna make sure I have the stability of two hands. For video work and stuff, two hands is nice and stable. I do like that, but I think I can do most of my shooting just with the external cam, taking pictures one-handed and having a better grip on it. Okay, so let's talk about video, and actually we are recording on the Google Pixel Fold right now. First thing I want to say before I talk about video, just want to preface that all smartphone videos from many different manufacturers tend to fall into the same kind of traps because of the small sensors. So first off, video is sharp, but sometimes over sharpened. Skin tones can often get a little bit smushy. Hopefully I look okay right now, but probably a little bit soft.
You look smushy.
I look smushy, okay. This does now shoot 4K up to 60 frames per second, which is great, and it can shoot 10-bit HDR video, which helps control some of the bright highlights and large dynamic range situations, but you just don't have the detail in the sensor to actually then get some of those skin tones to have nicer gradation, a little bit more natural look. So I would say the video results that we see, as you can see here side by side, compared to the original Pro 7, very similar. Even in a low light situation, we're getting pretty similar results. Overall, I think most smartphone users will like the video capabilities here, but it's still a smartphone. You can't compare it to a full-on camera. See, it's been a very interesting experience here for me using a folding smartphone for the first time. And really, I think the first thing I want to talk about is actually from a photographic standpoint, was it really that useful? And honestly, I personally don't feel like it was. I feel like I would much rather just use the phone here in a standard mode, just off the external screen, using the 3 rear cameras. Other than for selfies where I can use the rear camera, I didn't find the fold experience that necessary. Now that being said, although the Pixel Pro 7 is certainly a better picture taker, I really didn't feel like the margin was that big. I mean, video looked very similar. I still really like the photographs I was getting out of the Fold, and so even though we have smaller sensors here, I actually think the photographic experience is quite similar. I absolutely can appreciate the benefits of just having the larger screen for things like Google Maps, or things more practical to a photographer, things like Lightroom Mobile. I really like the larger screen, easier to zoom in. I can judge things like sharpness a little bit better, and if I'm applying brushes with my fingertip, I found the larger surface area was beneficial to just be more precise. So is this expensive smartphone really gonna be worth it to you, and especially considering it's a little bit heavier, a little bit bigger, I think it's really gonna come down to how much you're gonna appreciate using those apps on a larger screen, how much you wanna multitask, how much you wanna maybe edit on this and not have to bring a tablet or laptop with you. From a purely photographic standpoint, I'm gonna use this phone basically folded up like this anyway, so then why not just save the money and get yourself a Pixel Pro 7? It's going to give you very similar shooting experience, slightly better image quality, those excellent skin tones that I really like on the Pixel series. Otherwise though, hopefully this video helps you guys decide if this is right for you and whether the premium's worth it. Thank you so much for joining us. Check out Twitter, check out Instagram, watch our podcast. You can see it here on YouTube or on all your favorite podcasting apps as well. And subscribe, like the video, we'd appreciate that. Leave your comments below. We'll see you guys soon with another episode on PetaPixel.